So good to be together tonight. And again, a Merry Christmas and a warm welcome to everyone. It's good to be here together, gathered before the Lord himself as a parish family, to welcome friends and visitors, especially those who may not go to church much, but have responded to a stirring of the heart, which is from the Lord, to be here tonight. I had the courage to cross the threshold of this holy place. It's good that you're here. Jesus delights in you. And I invite you to enter this Mass as you are. Whatever's swirling around in your heart, maybe joyful to be together as a family, maybe ground down and tired by the state of the world or even of one's own life, lonely because a spouse or loved one has died and this is your first Christmas without him or her, anxious about difficult family relationships that always seem to surface this time of year, peaceful that all the busyness of preparing for Christmas is done, so now you can enjoy. And children, I bet you're just a little bit excited about opening presents. Just let your heart be as it is. Let your heart be open and let it listen. That's the heart that Jesus wants to encounter tonight. You know, several years ago, a priest friend of mine told me this story about a parish Christmas pageant. There's a little boy, and he got a role that he didn't want. He had to be the innkeeper, right? Everybody else in the Christmas play gets to do something really nice and good, and he's the one that has to say, there's no room at the inn, right? And he was beside himself about this. He didn't want to do it. But his parents, were reassuring him, like, we need this part of the story, right? You're just playing a role. It's going to be okay. He wasn't buying it. Everybody else had a good part, and he's the only one with the sour note. So he asked his teacher if he could have a different part, but everything had been cast, and he had to go through with it. So the night came for the pageant, and there's Mary and Joseph, and they walk across the stage, dragging along their stuffed horse, and arrived at the threshold of the inn. They knocked again. Everybody's kind of nervously waiting until the face of the little innkeeper came to the door. And Joseph asked for a room for him and his wife and explained how she was about to give birth. And the innkeeper looked them over, peered out at the crowd. He started to falter, and then you saw his face harden. And he said, "There's no room at the inn." And his parents breathed a sigh of relief, but then the little boy's face, he brought out into a big smile, and he said, "But why don't you come in for a drink?" Right? Everybody wants to welcome the baby Jesus for Christmas, and isn't that why we are here tonight? You know, I'd imagine most of us are familiar with that 1946 classic, It's a Wonderful Life, by the Catholic director Frank Capra. It's a film replete with Christian themes, not only because the final act of the movie takes place on Christmas Eve, but because through the main character of the story, George Bailey, Capra indirectly shows us what the world would be like without Christ. There's some very deep, meaningful sorts of things that you go back and watch it. Still, I think I saw a list recently that it still has a strong showing in the top 10 best Christmas movies of all time. And if you haven't seen it, especially the younger generation, you got to see this film. So well done. It can show you what Hollywood can really do when it tackles meaningful things. So you know the story. George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart. He's generous, he's good, he's honest, he's a humble man with a real concern for his neighbors in Bedford Falls. And again in his life, he sacrifices his own desires and plans in life for the sake of others. He seemingly goes nowhere in life while they become rich and successful and travel around the world. And on Christmas Eve, in the midst of a financial crisis that will ruin him and his family business, George is seriously thinking about killing himself. But he's saved by the angel Clarence, who, in order to get George to want to live, he shows him what the world would be like if George Bailey had never been born. And Clarence takes George on a Christmas Eve tour of Bedford Falls without George Bailey. It's a hard, it's a dark, it's a godless place, given over to vice and violence, the exploitation and the mockery of the weak, the glorification of money and power. In fact, it's not even called Bedford Falls anymore. The hellish, godless place is, as you know, it's called Pottersville. Today, amidst the many struggles and difficulties and trials in the world, and they are many, we can feel a bit like George Bailey and question our lives in the world and even God. But more importantly, consider the question of today's mystery. What would the world be like had Jesus never been born? What would I be like if he had never been born? What difference does the incarnation make? What difference does Christmas make? Sometimes we can ask the question in kind of a frustrated way. Every year we hear about the Christ child who brings peace and light and joy, and yet our world still struggles with war and darkness and despair. And even for believing and practicing Christians, we can sometimes struggle to understand why life can be so hard and filled with difficulties and disappointments, where the Lord's presence seems far away, and his promises seemingly go unfulfilled. Sometimes life in this fallen world can bring even believers into a dark place like George Bailey found himself. So let's ask that. What would the world be like without Christ? We don't have a screenplay and a set and a movie director to show us, but we can look at the real world that Jesus was born into and find some clues. Ruled by Caesar Augustus and the Roman Empire, it was a world ruled by violence and strength, where power, intrigue, lust, and wealth were what mattered, where pride was glorified and humility despised. The poor and the weak were trampled. The Romans were ignorant of the eternal truths about heaven and hell, and the hardest truth of all, that without Jesus, we are all still dead in our sin. Slaves to death and sin and Satan. Yes, ancient Rome praised duty and piety and devotion to family and empire. But the Roman Empire was, especially at this time, was also characterized by desperation, hopelessness, and despair. It doesn't matter how much we conquer or have success in this world. If we have not yet welcomed Christ into our hearts and are striving to follow him, we are still slaves and dead in our sin. We could look into the world of the atheists of the last few centuries to get some idea as well. They tried to build a world without God and even against God. Revolutionary France, Marxist Russia and China, fascist Germany. And what was the result? The guillotine, the gulags, and the death camps. A kind of hell on earth. But maybe we don't have to look that far away. Maybe we could just look into our own hearts. Are there parts of us, the way we think, the way we act, the way we live, as if Jesus had never been born, as if the Lord wasn't present, as if he never became man and dwelt with us, as if he had never shown us a different way to live? Are there hellish and godless places in our hearts where the Lord has not yet been born? We all have them. Wherever sin still reigns, wherever there is ungodly self-reliance, it's a kind of Pottersville. It's a place of darkness and emptiness, often a place of shame. Like an empty manger, That place in your heart and in my heart is precisely where tonight Jesus wishes to be born and to dwell there and to abide with you there. Because the truth is, God did enter this world. Today, God the Son truly is born of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He enters this world of suffering and pain because he wishes to save us by dwelling with us at the very center of the human soul, changing that dark, empty, hellish place into a temple of his divine presence and filling it with his glory and love. And what's the easiest, least threatening way he could come to us? Nothing opens a heart like a newborn baby. I remember that. I was 8 years old when my sister was born. And that moment when she was brand new and put into my arms, heart just melted for her. We do not have to remain dead in our sins. And each day we get to choose how we will live in this world, the real world. The world full of hurt, but the world into which God himself was born. We also live in a world where there is a concerted effort to erase God from the world he created and redeemed by people who find him pathetic and irrelevant because he's willing to humiliate himself by becoming one of us. And it begins when we turn to him in our pain and frustration and hopelessness, where he gives us the grace of conversion and offer our souls and bodies, inviting him to be born in us. Now, when George Bailey was given his wish and saw the nightmare of a world without sacrificial love, without him, he undergoes a conversion, praying fervently that he might be delivered from the nightmare, even if it meant that he would be ruined financially, disgraced, and sent to jail. He offered himself in sacrificial love, and his prayer was answered, and he gained a new vision of the world. To choose to live in reality and in the truth of the incarnation doesn't mean that things are always going to be easy. Try opening the godless part of your soul to him. It's humiliating and painful. But that's the Lord's plan. It's been his plan all along. Right? Listen to the prophet Ezekiel. My dwelling place shall be with them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. John chapter 1. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. We have beheld his glory, the glory as of the only Son from the Father. And in Revelation chapter 3, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him, and he with me. Here is a newborn baby wrapped in swaddling clothes. Here he is in his real presence, wrapped in the appearance of bread and wine. Isn't this why we are here? To be with him on the day he entered this fallen world to save us. So, has he been invited into your home, into your heart, into your life? What difference will this Christmas make? And let's invite him into the Pottersville of our own heart. And to invite him in, not just for a drink, but that he may dwell there forever. Press him close to your heart. Please, Lord, come inside and never go away.